evening, everyone. This is John Craig,
And this is Sandy.
and it is good to be with you this evening. This is a live program, by the way, and we're so glad that you're hanging in there with us. We got some things we need to talk about. Hey, what about Sukkot?
Sukkot is almost here. If you guys are wanting to join us in Amarillo, or really Spearman, Texas, but join with the Life of Worship congregation, you need to drop me an email, fill out the registration form, both actually, and get excited and start praying because we're going to have a great time.
Yeah, it's going to be really good and
And it's called Immovable.
unmovable.
Yes. So,
Especially with all of the different pressures that we are facing in today's culture and society and politics and all of this, that sort of stuff. Unmovable. What a theme.
So let's go ahead and turn into Psalm 23. Guess what? We're on verse 6. We're on the last verse. Can you believe it? It's taken us a while, but we're on the last verse. But we're going to read all of Psalm 23. And y'all open your word, but you probably know it by memory, which is great.
And so Psalm 23, verse 1, a psalm of David. Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou dost prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever.
All right. So, because we are beginning a new verse, we are actually going to go back to the shepherd's perspective, and the shepherds look at Psalm 23 by Philip Keller, because I have found it completely interesting to see a psalm written about sheep from an actual shepherd's point of view, because that's what David's role was in more ways than one, of course. But to see it from his perspective has really enlightened me on some things, and even our position and Yah's position as the shepherd, as the husband, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sort of opened this new paradigm. Has that done the same for you, John?
Oh, yeah. I tell you what, there's been so many different things I haven't considered when we've gone through each one of these verses and broken them down.
And I don't think we would have considered it, some of this, without actual information from a shepherd himself, because that is not something that is a normal profession, at least here in the United States, in the Western society, probably. I mean, there are shepherds out there, sheepmen out there, but they're fewer and far in between, I would say, at least in this part of the country. So anyway, so let's look what he says. And Philip Keller reminds us that the psalm has emphasized the care that the shepherd has taken throughout this whole journey. He's emphasized what he's done and how he has worked for the sheep, how he has prepared the way for the sheep, how he has stayed alert, how he has been the watchman, how he has used his own skill to make sure the sheep's journey is safe, as well as their pasture, to make sure they're well, that they are healthy, that they are strong. He's expressed all sorts of concern, and even at his own self-sacrifice for himself. And with all of this care, with all that's been done for the sheep, one thing it does do is it shows us that he loves his sheep, that he cares for his sheep, and that he loves his role even as a shepherd. He loves the work that he does because he loves the sheep. He loves the job. And you want to know something? That really is expressed too, because how often do you see somebody who hates their job? Does the work of their hands reflect a great job or that they hate their job? I would say that more often than not, their feelings towards their job can be seen in the work of their hands, actually. And So I want us to be reminded that we need to show ourselves in what we do, because the shepherd has done so for us. So when we see surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of our life, it's really summed up here by the psalmist in this brave statement. Goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, because the shepherd cares, because he's skilled and he has loving management towards us. And it's been very evident in every part of that sheep's life. And everything he's done is born of love, because he loves the sheep. He loves the job. He loves his work. It's worth restating this point, that if the sheep are mismanaged, you're going to have just the opposite. Okay, what do I mean by that? Because sheep themselves, under poor management or not managed at all, can be considered destructive livestock. Actually, they can really mess up a land. They can ruin, they can ravage the land. Some say it's almost beyond remedy. But here's the contrast in that. When a sheep is tended by a loving shepherd, by a shepherd who cares, they can be the most beneficial livestock on the land. In fact, they can make dead land come to life. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just look at a few things. According to Philip Keller, their manure is the best balanced of all produced by any domesticated stock, bar none. Now, isn't that interesting? What the sheep leave behind is better balanced than any other livestock, domesticated stock. And so when you scatter the manure over the pasture, it actually improves the soil so dramatically that new life will spring forth, because the soil is so much better than it was. In fact, sheep that have been taken care of, they have this habit of always wanting to rest or seek the highest ground. Now, in general, the higher ground is not necessarily the most fertile ground. It's usually some land that's lacking. In fact, the better ground is usually in the lower lands, in the valleys, in the lowlands, in the lower area. But the sheep always they gravitate to this higher ground. And because they gravitate to the higher ground, it redeposits what was taken from the lowlands back onto the high ground, and it causes that high ground to become healthy, that land to be renewed, that land to be restored, or maybe to have life that it hasn't had for some time. So another thing to look at about sheep is that sheep will actually consume a wide variety of herbs and weeds and plants, more so than most other livestock. In fact, some say no other livestock consumes the kind of things that they consume. And because they eat the weeds and other undesirable plants that often can be an invading species in a field, that field continues to stay healthy. So the healthy grass, the healthy things in that pasture, in that field, will spring forth life. So now you have the soil's been made better, and now you have something that's good for the land that is coming forth, where the bad is being taken away by the sheep, those weeds and things. And it is said that in a few years, a flock of well-managed sheep will actually clean and restore a piece of ravaged land as no other creature can do. Now, when I hear that, I find that fascinating, because so the sheep restore land if they're taken care of, if they have a shepherd, if they have the good shepherd. Now, before we go on with what Philip Keller said, I want us to take that into perspective, and let's take a look at us as the sheep, because we have a great shepherd. If you'll come back in and we can talk about this for a minute. So we have this idea that sheep that are well managed are supposed to restore a land. Sheep that are well managed are supposed to bring forth life from a land that has otherwise maybe not had much life on it, or been full of weeds and things that choke other life out. And I think that can be said for us as people as well, because when we are on a land, we are to tend it and care for it. In fact, what did Adam do in the garden? He was supposed to tend the garden. We are to tend the land that we are taking care of, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about this. Uh, I was just thinking about this article that had come up, and maybe we'll talk about it over on the Uncensored News for the Craig Report. But there is an Amish farmer that had a community of club members where they would get his organic natural foods. So think about it, Amish. He has his own grass fed beef, and he has his own, of course, all the produce that he grows. And here's the kicker: his beef didn't have all the injections and all of the things in there that they're shooting our animals with, all the hormones, all the different growth things, all the antibiotics, all that type of things. It was all just good beef, grass fed. And he, on his crops, he I think he has like 49 different families part of this co-op, part of this food club. And 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 these and his and he doesn't use fertilizer, so it's all natural grown. Well, where does he get the fertilizer? He gets the fertilizer from the cows and puts that on the fields. And so it is a highly nutritious food that's being grown, and the beef is the best. And what's he do? He's actually reclaiming the land. He's taken all this land that not allowing any chemicals to go into it and protecting it that way. And he doesn't have to use pesticides because everything is done naturally. And that is like the perfect gardener on steroids of what he's doing now. The FDA, the USDA, and all this doesn't like him. They've actually arrested him and want him to apologize, and they want him to succumb to their mass tyranny. But this is a guy that basically says, this is what my customers want. They want pure food, non-invasive, non-chemical, non-pharmaceutical food in their beef and in their produce. And I'm doing that. And he's done quite well. I mean, he's Amish, and he's done quite well at doing this type of farming and cattle raising. But that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do that, maximize our land for maximum production. So healthy meat, healthy crops.
Well, I was also thinking, we know that sin kills land. In fact, we look at even the areas of desert where was once life. Think about this. The children of Israel cut down lots and lots and lots of trees in their journey in the wilderness. Did the wilderness always look like it does now? I do not believe it did. Because think of the wood they had to burn and the trees they had to cut down, et cetera, as well as the water in that land at the time. The land has changed. Now, if sin kills a land, and it does, what happens when people that are his people come into a land? We are to restore those places in the land, both spiritually and physically, because Yah's given us charge over it. We are the sheep of his pasture. Yes, we are his. We're also the body. He is the head. We are so many things. We are the bride, or supposed to be. So what happens to the land where we're at, physically and spiritually? I'm going back now thinking of Sukkot. One of the things that we've always said, and Monty has said, and other camps say, is you keep the camp clean. You keep the land nice, because Yah's not going to come show up at a place that's in disarray, that hasn't been respected, where the land has just been cluttered and not taken care of. I mean, yes.
No, it's true. I mean, think about this: in the wilderness, when you have 12 tribes, you have 3 to 4 million people. And what would happen if they didn't take care of that camp? I mean, just think about if all just the sheer amount of human waste.
Exactly.
Would have been tremendous. I mean, think about what goes on in a city. I mean, we live in a city of 100,000 or almost 200,000. And I can't, the amount of waste that is produced, whether it's sewage or just trash, of course, they didn't have all modern packaging or anything like that, but nevertheless, there's always trash, there's always debris, there's always sewage, and it's a massive work that has to be done just for the city of Amarillo. I can't imagine. I mean, that's not even a tenth of the number of people that were in the wilderness.
But think about this. He always stresses, and we have followed suit, keep the camp clean. It's beyond sewage. Keep the camp clean. Pick up after yourself. Take care of it. Take care of the land. In fact, we're to leave the land. When we leave a campground, it's to look better than it did before we came in. Why? Because we represent the Father. We represent him, and it's supposed to it is supposed to look like his fingerprints have been all over the place.
Well, think about this too. Think about, I mean, that's certainly our responsibility. But okay, we gather at Sukkot. What happens if someone comes in with a foul mouth? When someone comes in with just nasty jokes or anything like that, and that's air pollution. That's is that a camp that Yahweh would want to come in and show up in? And a lot of times people say like, well, I don't think language really matters because it's just all part of language, and so we should be able to use it. But then honestly, is that the language that Yeshua would use? And is that the language that causes him to be attracted to us? Because so you have the cleanliness, the physical cleanliness of the camp, but what we are verbalizing in that camp is just as much pollution. If we're not watching our words, we can be cursing one another, we can be back talking, we can be backstabbing, we can have our little side conversations about how the camp should be run, or we wouldn't do it this way, or I can't believe they allowed this to happen. All of those different things are the same issues that Moses had to deal with, but it's all part of, but with that complaining and that Lashon Hara, there were ramifications. Miriam had leprosy, right? And then she had to go outside the camp for 7 days. We had murmurings and complainings with the Korah rebellion. And so what happened? Families were swallowed up. We had rumors and complaints and all that sort of stuff when they decided not to go into the land. And what took place? They said, oh, it's too much. And then Yah said, well, I'm not going to go with you into the land. They said, oh, we messed up. We'll go into the land now. And so without the protection of Yah, they went in and they were slaughtered. So each event of complaining always brought catastrophes, because that's not the type of camp that Yah would live in. It's not the garden of his desire. And of course, the garden starts in our heart. And so if that type of stuff's coming out of our heart, then is that the garden that Yah wants to live in?
Well, I would say no. And that's what's so beautiful about the actual sheep themselves. Wherever they go, if they're tended by the Good Shepherd, and we are tended by the Good Shepherd, there's life that springs forth. Wherever we go, there should be life that springs forth, physically and spiritually. It's almost, think of a cartoon, and I've seen something similar to this at one point, where people are walking and behind them is flowers bloom, pop up, and life pops up. That should be what it's like with us. Because first off, the physical land, yes, we're taking care of it. And because we're honoring him, it says all of creation cries out for the sons of Yah to do what they're supposed to do, right? So if we have that, then literally the physical land is crying out for us to take dominion. And that's a key. We are to take back what the enemy has stolen. We are to take dominion, and wherever our foot treads is his ground. That should be his ground. It should be, hey, life is coming forth. And then wherever we go, the words of life, the Torah, the fullness of the Spirit, Yeshua HaMashiach, springs forth, and people come to life too, because we're not so inwardly focused that we're not outwardly good, but more sheep come into the pasture and bring forth more life. And the sheepfold gets bigger and bigger, and though there are more sheep, there's that what it doesn't trample the land. Instead, it brings forth more life, and more land is taken back. And that's exactly what we're supposed to do. Just like these physical sheep, they leave behind a good land at what was once ravaged, what was once worthless land, like no other creature can do, like no other person, like no other. The bride, when she goes forth, should leave that trail of life and reclaiming what was stolen. In fact, that's what we're supposed to do. Take back what the enemy has stolen. Take it back, take dominion, take authority, and bring forth life.
And so you can look at it. I mean, how many times did was it prophesied over the people they were a flock, out there in the wilderness? Isn't even Balaam even said something close to that? And how beautiful are the tents of Jacob, but also going into the land, there's one thing that's very unique about Israel, is that there is no natural water source there. Yeah, there is the Sea of Galilee, there is the Jordan River, but in terms of where it's at, it's the lowest land, and it goes below sea level, and it goes into the Dead Sea. And modern irrigation can have pumps, and they can pump it out and pump it up to the higher ground and out of that area and into the growing regions. But that's man's technology. But compare that to the Nile River. The Nile River in Egypt always had it had its ebbs and flows, but there was always water in the Nile. It always flowed from the mountains down in Africa, and the flow of just billions and billions of cubic feet of water coming in and then heading north up into Egypt, where they were able to, with the type of land they have, set up the different canals, set up the irrigation, and they could have fertile land in Egypt where they could grow things. They didn't have to depend on Yah, because the river was always there. It was always stable. It was always reliable, year after year after year. It cycled in its its flood season and its low season, but there was always water in the Nile River. They did not have to trust Yah for anything. They trusted the river. They made it into a god. And yet, when you go into the land of Israel, there is no water source by which you can actually rely on, because there's so much of Israel is so far away from the Jordan. It's so far away from the Galilee, and even the rain and the snow melt that comes off of those mountains, and it goes down. It fills up the Galilee, fills up the Jordan, but the reliance to be able to grow your crops, to be able to have even grass for your flocks, was relied upon by Yah. And that's, I think,
by the good shepherd.
Yeah. And so so how do you keep the land? How do you keep the rains flowing? Well, you keep Torah. You walk within the parameters of the scripture. You walk according to his ordinances. That was the only demand of Yah. You can have this land, but you got to walk in my Torah. And that Torah is not supposed to be something that you're going in, I did this, so therefore, God, you have to do this. No, the whole purpose of the Torah was so that we could gaze upon the beauty of Yah. We could be fascinated by him. We could adore him. We can look into the eyes of our beholder and embrace him. And in that relationship between the people, between the land, and the Torah and the Creator, then Yah would provide rain in its proper timing, in its proper season. And so that's the only way that Israel survived. But when they followed Torah, they always had rain, they always had crops, they always had grass for their flocks. They had it all. They had what they needed, and they prospered. And and to their downfall is when they decided to say, well, there's more going on here. There's these other gods that are a little bit easier to follow. And so they turned their back on the Most High. And what happened? Ultimately, the land vomited them out. Ultimately, the land stopped producing. The rain stopped coming. They were no longer able to feed their flocks. They weren't able to feed their families. They didn't have enough. The people either went into captivity or they just simply left. They migrated to other places where the land was richer. And that all comes in to the point of what's a good shepherd do? A good shepherd is always making sure that his flock, it's not only that they're in the green pastures and by the still waters, but that good shepherd is also making sure that those sheep are still living within the parameters of safety. So, and therefore, then the benefits of the land would produce for them.
Well, and I love that because you brought in the rain and the Torah. And we know that following Torah, following his word, following Yeshua, being full of the Spirit brings forth rain, not only in our lives, but it brings forth rain in the land. And we have finally gotten some rain. What happens to the land when the sheep are following Torah and it rains? I know my plants, over the little bit of rain that we received just a little over an inch. Now, guys, we're in an area where we haven't gotten but probably a few inches this year. I mean, it's not been much. We are so far behind in the amount of rain we should have. But just with that little bit of rain, you look around the land and it's green again. What once looked dead looks alive. Even in my garden, I had plants that grew 6 inches to a foot just because of 1 inch of rain over 2 days. And think of a whole people, a whole patch, a whole flock, all of the people in a land following his word, following Torah, being full of the Spirit, following Yeshua. Imagine what would spring forth in that land. I mean, even now, Israel is taking the land which was once dead and it's coming forth to life. And we know a lot of Israel does not follow Torah, even though they're quote unquote Jewish. But even those that are there have occupied that land, and the land is full of life, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful. And it wasn't before. What did Mark Twain say when he visited the land back in his day and time? I can't remember, but it was something like, who would ever want to be in this land? It's pretty
Yeah,
bad.
it was a forsaken land.
It was a
Yeah,
forsaken land, but it's
right.
not anymore. Imagine with a whole people honoring his Torah. So even with the children in the wilderness, then when we talk about a wilderness, I've talked before, the wilderness doesn't have to be a dry, parched place. The wilderness itself can be full of life and green, depending on how you see it, but it's still a wilderness because you're not in your land. So if all of the people at one point were following his word and his Torah, imagine what that land actually did look like. Because as I said, there was water springing forth. The residue of them walking on and the water still following them, that land was still watered. It would have been green with life. And the trees that had to be around for them to cut down was a different looking land when the children were following his word. It's a different looking land when we follow his word. It in the ancient literature, sheep were actually called those of the golden hooves. Yeah, I learned that one. I did not know that. Those of the golden hooves, that was referring to sheep because they were regarded and they were esteemed so highly for their beneficial effect on the land. So it's not just someone following the Bible or the Torah saying that sheep were good to land, or some shepherd because he's prejudiced with his sheep. People in general said, hey, sheep are around, we're going to have good land. It's going to be good. The land's going to be beautiful. Shouldn't that be the taste that we leave in people's mouth? Oh, there's believers out there. There's there's people that are following the Torah, we're going to have great looking land. Philip Keller goes on to say, in my own experience as a sheep rancher, I have in just a few years seen 2 derelict ranches restored to productivity and usefulness because they had a good shepherd and sheep on the land. So he said that where they were at, those areas were eyesores, they were depressing, and they're now beautiful and park-like and full of great value because sheep were on the land. So, in other words, if you think about it in this aspect, goodness and mercy follow the flocks. Goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Wherever we go, behind us is the good land. But goodness and mercy follow us. I think that's a really interesting way to think of that scripture. Are goodness and mercy following us because of what we do?
Well, and look at that word for follow. It means to run after. So and that word goodness is tov, mercy is chesed. So is that which is tov, which is something that cannot be improved upon. It's good that cannot be improved upon, and mercy, which is chesed, which is come on, my computer's
loving kindness, mercy, grace, right. All of that is chesed.
Is it running after us? I mean, like, is it pushing us? It's like the opposite of running after us is persecution. So in other words, is goodness and mercy pursuing us as if it's going to take us down, like totally overrun us? I mean, that is like, which is, kind of a negative thing in a positive way, saying, is it coming after us that hard? And, okay, let's look at another example. And we were talking about the land and the rainfall and modern Israel, and what in modern Israel, a lot of the irrigation now is coming from gray water. So, gray water is it's the non-sewage water. It's like the water that comes out of your sink after you brush your teeth or do your dishes. That's gray water. They use gray water to water their crops. Well, think about it. Are they receiving the full blessing of living in the land if they're having to use gray water? I mean, they're basically recycling the water to put back onto the plants because the soil will filter out anything that it needs to filter out. But is that God's design? Or is it that the plants need the rainwater, and do they not have the rainwater? And why would they not have the rainwater that they have to use alternative water resources to water the land in Israel? Is it because of this whole thing about following Torah? Is it because they have allowed a religious perspective of modern Judaism and and secularism as well, because it's a very secular government there, so to override and overrule the very commands of God that allows the land to keep them there? And so they're doing everything to keep the people there. So they're doing the recycling method. But where's the rainwater? Why don't they have enough rain? Why don't they have enough to be able to put on the crops? Because the promise is, if they'll follow Torah, they'll have their rain in their season.
Well, but if you think of the season are the winter and spring rains. And then it generally dries up between, it doesn't have to when you're following his word, but the general pattern is April through October or so, there's less rain, or if any. So in Israel,
that seems to be the pattern, but
that pattern now anyway.
Right. But is that the ideal way? Is that
No.
God's promise? No, the promise is that they'll have the rain for the crops, to raise the crops, and to for the fields, so the herds can graze upon the grasslands and that type of thing. So, we all have fallen short. As Romans says that we've all fallen short, we've all sinned, and we've all fallen short of the glory of Yah. And so it's everywhere. I'm not trying to point fingers at Israel. I'm just trying to state the obvious. Why don't they get the benefits that the Bible talks about, the scriptures tell us about when we walk in Torah?
Okay, same question. Why is it that the Panhandle of Texas and much of the United States is under severe drought? The lakes, Great Lakes, have dried up into nothing. Why is that? I mean, I'm answering a question we already know the answer to.
Mm-hmm. And also, look, Europe is dealing with the same issue. There's areas in Russia they're dealing with the same thing. China's dealing with drought. All these countries in the world are dealing with drought. India's dealing with drought.
Well, you said Turkey. I mean, we were talking yesterday about Ephesus, and Ephesus used to be a port city, and now there's no water for it to be a port. I mean, it's not any longer because
the sea is withdrawn, right? Either the land is elevated, possibly because there's a lot of earthquakes in that area, so the land is elevated. Perhaps the sea has withdrawn itself, and it's I don't know how many miles away, 30, 50 miles away to the coast now, and all because of different shifts that have taken place.
Or because the land is dried up because they're not following His word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the other thing is look at the Sahara Desert. They said it used to be lush with.
I agree. I just said that the desert areas were once blooming. They were once lush, but the desert increases because sin greatly increases, and it kills everything. That back to the scripture. All of creation cries out for the coming of the sons of Yah, for the sons of Yah to take their place, for the sons of Yah to take their dominion and authority and remove the sin and from the land itself. All of creation groans, waiting. Why? Because death takes over those places where life hasn't been brought forth through His people. Well, that is as far as we're going to get tonight before we get into the Hebrew and other parts of verse 6. But it is a good perspective to think about how sheep are to leave a land, how they literally leave the land with a good shepherd, and relating it to how we should leave the land spiritually and physically wherever we go. And then we need to ask ourselves the question, what kind of land do we leave behind us? What's following us? What kind of land spiritually and physically is around us? Does life come forth, or does it seem death is wherever we go? So think about it. Anyway, that's it for me tonight. So I will let you take over.
Okay. Well, we want to say thank you for joining us for this edition of Walking in Spirit and Truth. As Sandi bows out there, we're going to continue with the Craig Report on the other side, but you're going to get it on lamnetwork.tv. So go to the website or pick us up over there on Twitch, or you can pick us up over there on Facebook. And we've got a number of different things that are hitting the news right now. So we're gonna go through those as quickly as possible in the short time that we have. So be with us, stay with us here on the Lamb Network, and until next time, shalom.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.